Documentary Janinne, A Way to Feel the World. Creation and edition of the documentary. Audiovisual Class 2017-2018 from Faculdade São Francisco de Barreiras, Bahia. When I searched for a school for the deaf that perhaps they could assist Janinne, the answer was negative because Janinne was blind. So, when I searched for a school for the blind, the answer was the same again because Janinne was deaf. And at the right moment I said no, I'm not staying. Because I had no contact with deafblindness. I knew what was deaf and I knew how to deal. I was just starting to work and then begin with a deafblind person who everyone said it was the apocalypse of interpretation. I was scared. If I was afraid as a professor of dealing with a deafblind student, when we start dealing with her, it disappears on the first day. We already expected her to go beyond high school because her life was one of achievements. Janinne was born from a twin pregnancy. Janinne and Jessica were born on May 10th, on a Mother's Day in Itabuna, Bahia. They were born prematurely at 6 months of gestation and they were incubated for 2 months in the hospital. It was a very difficult period. This period in the incubator, the people who went to visit the others who were born there in the hospital because it was not an ICU, it was an incubator inside a nursery. It was all very improvised at the time. Those that were going to visit, they looked at the girls, they thought that I was not the mother. They didn't know I was the mother. They thought I was the nurse. They used it to say, "Look at the little mice. The little mice sometimes don't survive." Others said, "Oh Lord, tomorrow they won't be alive." After they left the incubator, the doctor said that everything was fine. They did not have any problem. They had no sequel, but when I took them home, I began to realize the difference between Jessica and Janinne. Jessica was always curious, looking at the side, looking at another, and Janinne always with an absent look, not fixating on anything. Then I began to realize that there was something different and blindness was the first to be detected. So we moved from Itabuna and we went to live in Salvador, looking for professionals, speech pathologists. I specialized at school for Janinne, whatever it takes. We believed that in Salvador we would get that. So we moved to Salvador. It was many years in Salvador. The deaf-blindness was very unknown at the time. When I searched for a school for the deaf that perhaps they could assist Janinne, the answer was negative because Janinne was blind. So when I searched for a school for the blind, the answer was the same again because Janinne was deaf. My dream was to move to Goiânia or to São Paulo, a place where I would give the best attendance for Janinne. And then, when the news of going back to the country arrived, it was a shock. It was a big shake. It was another destruction of dreams, a dream of going beyond, of seeking for better conditions, and I knew that I wouldn't find good conditions in the country, since we had left Itabuna and didn't have those conditions. The first help that you look for in a country is APAI, right? I went to APAI, the Association of Parents and Friends of the Exceptional, and there it was said no, that there was no room for the blind and Janinne was also deaf, and that APAI was not working with deaf people anymore, and Janinne could not stay there, but I was given a school address, a state school where there were some teachers working with deaf children with deaf people. I searched for this school and the teacher was also surprised by the deaf-blindness. The teacher didn't know deaf-blindness, but the teacher asked me about my background, and at the time I had studied to be a teacher, I had not worked in the field. But I had magisterian, and then she said, Well, since you have the training for being a teacher, you come here with me and we will try to do something. And I enrolled Janinne in this school, and there I started learning sign language. We still didn't know how to teach Janinne, but we little by little found out. As soon as I learned the sign, I'd pass it on to the whole family, and I'd slowly find out how to pass it on to Janinne. We tried to do an experiment that she would do this with her hand, and here under her hand we were inserting the signs, giving the signs, and giving Janinne the concrete of that sign that it was being passed to her. Then I'd leave home, learn the sign from home. I would get out of the house, pass her hand and say, "Here's your house." I would arrive at school, "Here's your school." And we were inserting the signs in Janinne's life, in her daily life. For example, take a shower, drink water, and I slowly got into this little house that we did here so that she would one day have a sense of what we were talking about. There was an international conference and a speaker from the Federal University of Spain talked about how all the education work was carried out with deafblind people in her country. She put her country at my disposal that if I wanted I could go there to the university to specialize myself. At this moment, after the speaker had answered me and had given me these tips and this information, after she left, a lot of notes started coming from the plenary, from the people who were participating, saying that in São Paulo there was work with a deaf-blind people, that in Rio de Janeiro there was the Benjamin Constant Institute, where there was work with deaf-blind people, and that on the 1st of October of that time it was going to happen the second National Congress of Deafblindness in São Paulo. I went back to Guanambi at the time and I spoke to my husband. It was already close to October 1st and I only told him, "I'm arriving and I'm leaving. I'm leaving again to São Paulo to see this Congress, attend this Congress of Deafblindness." And there I found a diversity of deafblind people. I saw how the deafblind people communicate with Libras, Brazilian Sign Language. They were communicating and I strengthened myself and I was filled with hope and I knew it would work with my daughter. I went back to Guanambi, I specialized myself, I learned Braille, I learned Libras, I took several other courses. With everything adapted in Guanambi, we already knowing how to do this work with Janinne. That I did together also with the teacher there. It came the transfer of my husband to Barreiras. Arriving here in Barreiras, I found nothing again, no school. There was only a PAI, and no disabled person was in school. And I started a fight with the city to get the city give me a space to do work with Janinne, and also with other children who were out of school, who were deaf and blind. So I got that space after 3 months of going to the city hall, of going every day in the city hall. I got that space at the park of the school. That's when I started doing this work of sign language literacy for the deaf and the literacy for the blind in Braille. It was calm her entrance into high school. She already knew that she had the knowledge that she has to pass through all the years. I taught Janinne science methodology because she took the normal course, the normal high school course, and I was also a teacher coordinator of the internship. It was a bit difficult because we worked with a number of 40 students. So we cannot specifically attend a student in class as the class is collective, so we had the help of the interpreters. her mother made me an offer. Stay with Janinne for a week to see if you can adapt, if you can interpret and see. And at the right moment I said, no, I'm not staying. Because I had no contact with deafblindness. I knew what was deaf. I knew how to deal. I was just starting to work and then begin with a deafblind person who everyone said it was the apocalypse of interpretation. I was scared. But I accepted. I stayed a week, and in fact, after a week I felt that it wasn't being possible anymore. The arm hurt. I felt tired. You couldn't interpret, because when a math teacher was explaining the calculations for a deaf person, you would point and he would come to understand. Not here. Here you needed to bring something to the hand, put something concrete in the hand. We already expected her to go beyond high school because her life was one of achievements. She took the exam at UNB and she asked to enroll in the exam to study education at UNB. And she took this exam and I entered the necessary documentation so that she could have the accessibility and she was attended. And she always asked me what college is like, what's like to be in college, what you do in college. So I always knew all her desire to be part of a higher education. The night when I looked at a message from a friend of mine that was written like this: there is a person named Janinne Pires Farias who was proved in the exam for education at UNB. Is she the same Janinne? I said, I don't believe it. Then I ran to open the computer, looked at the approved list without talking to anyone, and she asking me. And I was already crying, and she's passing her hand on me and asking why you were crying. And I was saying, wait, I didn't want to give her the news. And then if it wasn't Janinne, right? That was rewarding. We even get emotional. It's something historical. We feel very happy, very cheerful, because we have contributed. It came through here. A great girl is worth it. She was screaming a lot. She was jumping from happiness inside the house and screaming Jessica's name. She ran into her room and grabbed her cell phone and called Jessica and shouted, Jessica, I got admitted. I stopped by and he gave me the phone so I could talk to Jessica, and it wasn't Jessica. She called the wrong number and the person on the other side was asking what it was, what happened, and I said, I'm sorry, she called the wrong number. And then I called Jessica, and it was a moment of great happiness, a conquest of a struggle, a real struggle that had been built since her birth. I expected nothing less of her. I always expect more. When UNB heard about Janinne's approval, UNB went into a trance. Oh my God, now what are we gonna do? Because she was also the first person with a disability to get approved by UNB. In fact, the university also receives the student without an adequate preparation of the professors. So what we have now is to prepare the room, prepare the campus to receive her, prepare the specialized education service, and also hire expert personnel to act directly in Janinne's care. Until today, we are under construction. The professors and I, we sit, discuss, plan, do not do, build. If I was afraid as a professor of dealing with a deafblind student, when we start dealing with her, it disappears on the first day. Since the beginning, she has never weakened. She always goes after her goals. She seeks to enforce her rights at the university. She has no limits. Janinne is a determined girl, and sometimes we look from a distance and we say, poor girl, she is not seeing anything, she is not even listening anything, and she's like, I don't care. We sometimes go through difficulties, some troubles in life, and we look away and see no hope, no way out, and we get very sad about it, and she doesn't. She faces the limitations according to her reality and moves on. When we tell our story, and the people who know our story come to me and say, What would Janinne be if it wasn't for you? Actually, I really don't know what I'd be if it wasn't for Janinne. In the past, my mother Samara battled very hard, and I want to be just like her. I want to work hard to be a teacher. And to teach deaf people Libras because Janinne wants to be a teacher, know all the subjects, know the world, and be able to teach the world in Libras. She recognizes herself as a disabled and states 1,000 times every day that she has no desire to listen, no desire to see. I'm deaf-blind and I like being that way. And that's the biggest lesson she's ever given me. The will she has to position herself. So that her mother put her the cochlear implant for her to hear when she took her life over and found out it was her life. She took the device out and I'm deaf and that's it. That's strong for me, seeing her recognize herself as a person, and sometimes we look from a distance and we say, poor girl, she is not seeing anything, she is not even listening anything, and she's like, I don't care. She is happy like Translation in Libras, Brazilian Sign Language, by Renan Antonello. Portuguese subtitles by Ellen Borgesan. English subtitles by Josiane Macieira. Subtitle review by Laura Ancilotto. Dubbing by Ana Carolina Toledo. Edition by Fernanda Falkowski and Renan Antonello.